like that. But. All right, we're back, and it's COMP305, and it's winter 2016. That's game programming 1, week 10, part 4 of our broadcast. And I want to kind of patch up the stuff that we couldn't get working on this game so far. So remember what we're doing. We kind of put together a game controller class. Let's take a look at this, guys. Hi. We put together a game controller class. Here it is, right? And even when I kind of drag and drop that in as a prefab, notice that even when we do that, it doesn't matter. You still can't drag and drop it into our player. Remember, we did this before, and I talked about this, right? Because my game controller, my player itself, if I go back to player, right? If I look at my player class, so here's my player class. And my player isn't in here. It's got a player camera, and inside there we also have this player shooting script, and here it is. If I look at my script, my player shooting, it says, hey, get a reference, a public reference to my game controller. But because my game controller is itself a prefab and so is my player, I'm having some issues. So how do I do this? Instead of making it a public game controller reference, I can do it with find with tag, right? That whole idea we did last time. So does anyone remember how to do that? How do I make a find with tag? Instead of making it public, I'm going to make it private. So let's change this up. So I'm going to make it private. And it's still going to be a game controller, but we're going to say just rename this thing just with our underscore just to make sure that we know it's going to be a, we're just renaming it as a underscore game controller. So everything that game controller is in, we should have game controller score value and so on, right? So how do I make a reference to this thing as a private variable? So if you notice, these are my, or actually I should probably position it properly. So underneath my transform, right? I want to make it so that my player shooting, right, has access to my my game controller. How do I do that? What should I do first? Come on, guys. I want you to think about this. I might ask this on another quiz because we have some time before we get from now until then, until we're done. So what would I do for my game controller? Well, how do I connect this thing up, right? Well, first of all, we start typing, right? So we say this dot underscore game controller, right, is equal to what? We want to get a reference, right? Find object with tag or whatever. So we're going to say game object, right? That's what we're going to do. Game object dot find with tag, right? And we want to find the thing called game controller. Now notice I actually tagged it as game controller, right? So that's what this object is. But we want to tag it as, we want to cast it as game controller. So that way our game controller object, even though it says game controller here, is going to be a game controller. Now, sometimes what that does, when we save, yeah.
So that we have two variables with the three variables with the type game object. So in this case, which variable do we have to do in this line?
Game controller. Game object is the generic game object. Game object is the class game object. So give me the game object that has a tag of game controller in our game. That's what it's saying. Right? Let's see if it works first of all. Because if I go back to this null reference error, right? It says assets player shooting cannot convert type Unity game object, right? Cannot convert type Unity game object to game controller via a built-in conversion. So I'm taking game object and I'm making it into a game controller. Now we've done this before, right? So what's the right way to do this? Well, we make game controller, instead of game controller, we make it a game object. But if we did that, right? Now we're using find with tag, right? And what are the two things we can use? If I look at Unity 3D, find with tag, right? Find with tag. And if I look at the find with tag API documentation, it shows me what we can do, right? So we say, hey, respawn is equal to game object that find with tag respawn. That's what respawn is. Notice that respawn is this is the actually C#. Respawn, the type of game object the respawn is, notice they're using the var keyword for whatever reason, right, is a game object type, right? That's the way it is. So here's another one. So public game object respawn is game object dot find with tag respawn, right? So this is the C# side. This is the JavaScript or the Unity script if you want to talk about whatever that is. I wonder if that's just broken. It is. Let's just refresh that. There we go. Yeah, now it's hidden. Anyway, so yeah, this is the one that it looks like. So it looks like public game object, and then we're going to use respawn as the game object to tag with. But the problem with this is when we do this, we won't have any kind of code hinting for respawn. Respawn will just be a game object. So I can't do something like, if I called game controller the game object, right? If I did that, then I won't be able to do anything with it, right? So that's one. I can find a game object, but what I'm really trying to do is find the script, right? I want to get I want to have access to the script, not necessarily the game object. Okay. So let's get to the next piece. So what I really want to do is I want to get the script component attached to it, right? Which is a component. It's not a game object itself. So let's go back. So could I do something like this? So leave it as game controller, and game object find with tag game controller, right? Dot get component, right? Because game controller, the actual script is called as well. Did that work, right? So look what I'm doing. So I'm find the game object, game controller, and get the component called game controller of that object. Game controller would be the actual script, right? Of that object, and then cast it as game controller. Well, let's see if that gives us an issue, right? And no, it doesn't, right? Now, if I clear the screen here for a second, and if I run this thing, right? Now, if I hit it, I'm going to get 100 points. Now everything runs, right? Before it wouldn't, right? And the reason why it wouldn't is because we couldn't get a reference. I could not get a reference to my game object inside our script. Okay? Just a message. Just bear with me for a second. Daughter. Okay, so we've got this thing going on where we have everything working now, but I have to respawn, right? And there's a couple ways to do this. One way to respawn my character is to know where I want to respawn my guy. So if I go to my game controller itself, if I notice I have a game controller object, right? Here's my game controller object. And my player spawn point is a vector3 object, which is private, right? And what I want to do here somewhere in my, notice that it says my player spawn point is where it's going to respawn. But hey, hold on a second. What is my player spawn point? Where it's this new vector3 object at 0f 1.6 minus 5f. I've actually created a spawn point here that's private, and it's hard-coded. Yeah, it can work, but it's not the optimal thing. You probably want to make this so that you can modify this in testing. But let's test it to see if it actually runs. So I'm going to run this thing again, and if I fall off the world, I should respawn back where I started. So I go, it's not happening, huh? Well, no. I mean, it's not working because how am I knowing that I'm colliding? I haven't even checked the collider or anything, right? So I got to make a collider. So when my death plane and my death plane can do it all, right? My death plane is there, but there's a mesh collider on it. It's kind of weird that it's a mesh collider, but my death plane when it has a collider, that's why it stops my player from going through it. It doesn't have a mesh renderer right now. Right now I've turned the mesh renderer off. It's red like this. This is what my actual plane looks like, right? But I haven't set up anything so that when my character falls down there, it respawns, right? I haven't done that. Let's turn that mesh renderer off for a second. So how do I change that? Where would I want to have it? Do I want to have it on my game controller, right? Because that's where I have my game controller is going to control where my character respawns, right? But I need to send a signal to my game controller to say respawn character, right? That's one possibility. Second possibility is don't even bother with the game controller. Just have it respawn when I collide with the actual death plane itself, right? That's the easiest way. So if I have a player, any object that hits my death plane gets destroyed, right? Unless it's the player. If it's the player, respawn. And we're going to get the coordinates for respawning the player from the game controller, right? Okay. So that's one thing we can do. The other thing we can do is we can put the coordinates for the player inside the death plane to make it easy. Whatever you want. I mean, it's really, at the end of the day, as long as it works for me, in this particular case, I'm fine with it. So let's go into game controller. We put in here, right? In my game controller, I put my player spawn point, but I want to put this in the death plane script, right? Let's try this out. So let's make a new script for the death plane. So we go back to here and in here. I'm going to add a new script. So I create a new C# script. And we're going to call this death plane controller. Right? Here's my death plane controller script. And on my death plane itself, I want to take my death plane controller and just add it on. There it is. So all this is going to do is it's going to kill anything that goes on it, destroy anything that goes on it that collides with my collider. So on collider, enter, right? And it's not going to be a trigger. I can make it a trigger as well, but that doesn't make any sense. On anything that collides with my thing, I want to make it so that it dies, except for my player. My player will respawn. So let's do that. So double click. Here it is. So I want to make an on collision enter or on. I start typing on collision enter, right? And remember, it's a collision type, not a collider type, right? I think it's this. And if you can't remember, notice how it gives you some errors. It says it's got to say whether I'm void or whatever. It's got to have a return type, right, for my collider. That's what I have to have there, right? And notice when I hover over, it says collision other because that's what I've typed, right? But is that correct? Let's check that out. So let's go into Unity script here and say Unity on collision enter, which is the most common collider, by the way. I look at this, it gives me an example of how to do it. Here's my collision, and notice they just called it collision, right? And is that the right script again? Yes. So here's my collision, and then what I want to do is each of my contact points, right, that I've come in, I can check. I can also check for the other game object get compare tag and see what kind it is, right? So let's do that. So let's go back to my code, right? And I can say something like this: destroy. Look at this: destroy other game object. So anything that hits it, just destroy it, right? Now this means everything that hits it. If I push a barrel off into oblivion, it'll be destroyed too. Let's try this out, right? So I've got this script. All I'm doing is destroying all the other game objects. Anything that's going on there, bye-bye, destroy it, right? It's a good housekeeping too, because if anything falls off the edge of the world, it gets destroyed. But I don't want me to be destroyed. I want me to be reset. So how do I do that? So let's go back. So let's play the game. Cool. I want to push my barrel. Is there a way to push my barrel so it kind of moves? I mean, if I bump it, it's going to push. Right there it is. And then I jump on top of it. I'm jumping on top of my barrel now. And I want to kind of roll this thing, right? So is there a way to roll my barrel, right? So I kind of bump into it enough that, it kind of moves. Well, I'm pushing it into a corner, so that's not a great idea, right? Come on, barrel. Move out of the way. Roll, roll, roll. Ah, wait. Oh, I almost fell in there by myself. Right? See, there's no way. But I could do it in scene. If I go to my scene itself, the scene view, right? And if I focus in on the barrel wherever it is, so I kind of focus in on it. There's my barrel. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just reset it. So I'm going to kind of take this barrel and push it over here. And let's see what happens when I go back to the game, right? When it falls on there, barrel's gone. So there's no more barrel in my, when it hits the death plane, it's gone. In fact, if I hit the death plane, it's going to error out. That's what's going to happen. Watch. Ah! Right? The death plane, and then, oh wait, how come? Oh, I'm still alive. I didn't error out. I didn't die. How come I didn't die? Huh? It does. Right? If I didn't have a collider, then I wouldn't be able to collide with anything, right? I wouldn't be able to collide with the wall, right? So something happened, right? And let's see if I got any kind of console errors. No. All right, so I was able to stand on my collider and I didn't die. How come? Because, that didn't happen to me, right? I reset myself. to see if I can reset myself, if that will work. I'm just putting it out there because I want to show you the challenges of doing this thing, about resetting. We were able to do it when we did our platformer in 2D, right? We actually almost did the exact same thing. I have a death plane, I hit it, reset, right? But my player, it's kind of different, right? First of all, my player, right? You know, this object is a generated object. It's created by my game controller class, right? And it's going to try and destroy my game controller. But unfortunately, my player is the only thing that has the camera on it as well. I don't have another camera in the scene, right? I only have one camera, and that's the player camera. Let's test this by adding another camera to the scene. See if that's a problem. So I'm going to say create camera. Right, here's my camera. And let's get rid of this audio listener, because I only want to have one audio listener on the scene. So here's my camera. And if I go to my scene, and I look at the camera, I'm going to kind of move the camera around so I can look at my player, so I can see my player. This is my player object. Here it is. Now, this camera will be secondary. My main camera is going to be my player camera, right? Let's see how that works. So let's play. Here it is. And I don't see my other camera, but when I land now, I go, whoa, and then I'm still here. So player camera, nothing to do with it. And notice that my player clone is disappearing. Player clone's still there, even though I hit the death plane. Why? Okay. So camera didn't make a difference, right? Death plane says, if I look at my script again very carefully, it says this: destroy any other game object that I collide with. Any other game object. Well, let's start kind of listing what the other game object is. So I'll say debug.log, the other game object, right, dot name. What's the other game object name? Right, not the tag, name, right? Because all other objects have different names or whatever. Let's see what this object is. Well, actually, I can also do tag, right? Because tag was also fine. Name or tag, slightly different. Let's talk about this a little bit. So we'll run this thing and see what happens. So play, and then we'll run. I'll jump off the thing. Woohoo! Right? Okay. And escape. I go to console. Nothing. What's going on? How come it's not working for my player? Just saying, I'm putting it out there, right? Player works with my barrel. If I take my barrel, let's position my barrel a little differently. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. I want to move it over here, right? So it's going to just basically land. It's going to land on the death plane. So here's my barrel. It lands on the death plane. It's going to be gone, right? Let's see if this works. So, right. Gone. Joe, worked for my barrel. Hold on, and look, it even says barrel down here in terms of my death plane, right? So my barrel is gone, right? But not so for my player. What's the reason? Okay, so you mean I don't have an actual player in here. So you're saying, just trying to see if this is right, that well, I do have a body, right? But my body is generated, even my barrel. If I put my barrel in the scene, let's make my barrel come into the scene as a game object that's spawned by the game controller, and let's see if this is the problem, right? So what I want to do is I'm spawning this stuff, right? And what you're saying is, well, the reason why it's not working, Tom, is because your player is being put into the scene by the game controller, right? Let's not do that. Let's put a second player in the game. Doesn't matter, right? So I can put as many players in the scene as I want. Here's my player, prefab. Take my player, put it into the scene. There it is, second player. And we'll move him a little bit aside, all right, like this. Actually, we'll move him over here. So he spawns right over the death pit, right? And press play. It's okay. Oh, wow. Now here's a problem. It says there are 2 audio listeners. I can't move my stuff around. Okay, let's get rid of my second player's audio listener, right? Notice that I got some weird effects going on. Look at that gun that's happening right here. Look at that. It's like another gun floating in midair. Seriously, I can put as many players as I want in here. So here's my player. I put him in here, and here's my player camera. And my audio listener is here. Here's my audio listener, right? And let's get rid of my second player's audio listener. We'll remove this one. Yay. Okay, cool. Now let's press play again. Okay, player clone, and both players are alive. And it doesn't seem also that I can even rotate my guy. Even if I try and move the guy, I'm looking at my gun, and when I move, my gun moves. Both players are moving at the same time, but I can't seem to look at I can't look up and down anymore, that's for sure. It's messed up, right? But also, both players are sitting there, and one has been generated, and one is a clone. One's been cloned, and one is a thing I've dragged and dropped in to the scene. So that doesn't do it. That's not the reason. Someone mentioned a collider, right? But my player itself has a game controller and a rigid body, right? Here's my rigid body. So if I go to my game controller, right, it has a height of my game controller, which acts as a collider. But what I don't have is a separate collider object that's part of my player itself. I don't have that. That's one thing I don't have. I don't know why. Okay. Let's bring an aspect of my player back into the game. Here's my player, right? And what I want to do here is add in a collider, right? But I got to be careful of what type of collider I add in and what size it's going to be and the offset and everything else, because I want to make sure that this collider isn't going to impact me in any way, right? So because it's listening for an object to collide with, I'm still going to get a collision, but I want to make sure that when I collide with the object, it's only for my game controller, my death plane. So let's try and add this in. So add physics, and we'll make it a capsule collider, right? Here's my capsule collider. And with a height, here's my height. We'll make it the same height, 1.8, right? And we'll make it the radius of 0.5. Here's my capsule collider. And if I click, edit, and if I focus in there, so I'm going to go over to this. Let's just move this around so you can see my player's collider. It doesn't have to be very big, eh? As long as it could be a capsule collider, it could be a sphere collider, it could be in any type of collider I want, right? No, right now it's the same size as my character, right? So if I just add this collider in there, be careful, I got two colliders in there. One that's kind of generated by my script, by my first-person controller script. This one kind of generates my own little collider. And there's this one that kind of is a collider within a collider, right? Okay. What I really want is for this one to kind of work just like the other one, right? Because if I go to my first-person controller, character controller, right, whether I turn it off or on, or even my rigid body, right, as an example, I need to be able to see my collider. Let's try and see if this is going to clash. Whoa. Oh, yeah, because I have two of them. Let's just undo that. I meant, let's apply the changes back to my prefab. That's what I meant to do. So apply the changes back to my prefab, right? It's on my player. And let's remove my player now because I don't need them. And run it again. Okay, it looks like normal. And if I run into the guy, no difference. I can run across the scene, and I don't see anything else going on. If I look at the scene itself, my console log, I just see the player object that hits, right, but not me. What else could be it? Come on, I put a collider on there, so let's put this guy back. So here's my collider, my capsule collider. How about I make the collider big, like really big, much bigger than normal? Look, my collider is only 1.8, or 1. Let's make it so it's big. Let's make it so it's 3. Big long collider, like massive, right? So bigger than the other one, right? And radius is 0.5, no problem. And I will apply this back to my character, my capsule collider, and if I get rid of him, and I check my actual player, he has got a capsule collider of 3. There it is, right? And if I press play, it's pretty big now. Okay, and if I run and I jump, not destroyed. And nothing. What else could I do? Come on, guys. I could make it a trigger collider. I could make my death plane not a regular collider. I can make it a trigger collider. And then I could add a trigger collider onto my player object, right? So instead of it being capsule collider this, I can make it a trigger, right? Which doesn't mean how big it is. I can make it 3 or whatever height. Well, let's make it the same size just for now. So make it 1.8, so it's not 18. 1.8, right? And if I make it a trigger collider, that's cool. I'll save that. But that means my death plane's object has to be a little bit different too. So let's go back to my death plane. So here's my mesh renderer, right? My mesh renderer is one thing, but instead of making my mesh renderer what it is, right? I'm just saying I could add another trigger collider on this one, right? So if I collide with my mesh collider, I'm going to get, like, for example, barrels. That's one thing. And if I collide with my trigger collider, example player, it'll also work. Let's see if that works. So add another component, and it will be a physics component, which will be, again, I'll make it a mesh collider, right? But this mesh collider will be, and notice how it's not convex. Notice I can't make it trigger unless I make it convex, right? So it's convex mesh, but it's a trigger collider. All right, so 2. All right, cool. Let's see if this works now. So just running it like this, I got 2 trigger colliders, and I run, and I jump. No, okay, that's okay. I still get the collision with the barrel, which the barrel means that it works, right? Because if you look at my scene for the game, my barrel starts off there, and then even if I clear my the game itself, so if I clear the console for the game, clear, right? I go back to scene. Barrel, when it falls, it's going to give me a it's going to report barrel, right? There it is, barrel. Right, so barrel got destroyed. All right, so that's one thing I want. So how do I do it? Let's go back to my script. So I've got my on collision enter 2D, right? And what if I go void on trigger enter 2D? On trigger enter, not 2D. On trigger enter. And instead of collision, we'll have a collider. Collider, other, right? And we'll say anyone that triggers a collision, anything that triggers a collision, debug.log, other.gameObject.tagName, right? I want to send that out before I destroy anything. Okay, good. So debug.log, press play, and barrel. Okay, and let's see what I got on my console. Should have barrel once. Oh man, I got barrel twice. So even though I have a trigger collider and a regular collider, right? I'm triggering the collision twice because one is hitting my trigger and the other one is hitting my collider, all right? Let's see if I jump on it, will I get that? So, right, I'm still playing. So I'll go back to the game and then, oh, good. And I get player, see? Player comes up, this is good. Player means now I can deal with it. And that's because of my trigger collider, right? Okay, cool. Let's do one more test. So I got my player, and I've got this capsule collider that's a trigger. Let's get rid of my capsule collider. So no more capsule collider on my player. Press play, and I go over to the edge of the board and throw myself off. Boom, player. This is good because what it means is that all I need is one trigger collider, right? One trigger collider that's going to be on the game itself, right? On the death plane itself, not on my player. I don't care about that. The console, notice I have player, barrel, barrel, right? Which means, if I go back to my script, I don't need this one on collision enter 2D. I need this one. So I take this one here, copy it, put it down here, paste it. Don't need these debugs because I know they work. And get rid of this whole thing. So we're only using a trigger collider, not on collision enter, right? Just a trigger enter. Let's try this out. So save. I mean, I'm showing you this thing because this is the biggest problem they have. They don't understand how collisions work. Okay, so my barrel's still there. Hold on a second. Sorry, I've got all these extra things here. Barrel's gone, right? And now let's see if I go. This is good. This means my character got eliminated, and the reason why I can't see my scene, camera's gone, right? Camera's gone because tied to the player, it worked. I was eliminated. But I don't want to destroy my player. I want to reset my player. And in order for me to reset my player, I needed my reset coordinates, which means I can get that from my script, from my game controller script. I'm just going to move it over. So my game controller doesn't need that anymore, right? What would I give? Why would I go from one script to the other unless I need it? So my death plane can know where my player starts. And by the way, the death plane can have more than one spawn point for the player. right? Depending on where I am and where I fall, I could program it so that there's more than one death plane. So I can have a death plane that's just for this part of the game, just like we did in our platformer, right? So if I fall on that death plane, I get spawned back to a certain place. And if I fall to another death plane, I get spawned back to that place. Well, if that's true, I should be able to program my spawn coordinates as a public property in my inspector that I can modify so I can have more than one death plane, right? And I should also be able to modify my death plane size dynamically, right? Which I can because it's the size, it's in my inspector, right? All right, cool. So let's make a public property here. There's a public instance variable. And we're going to call this, it's going to be a vector3 object, right? So public, right, vector3. And the vector3 object is going to be called spawn point. Right? That's all it's going to be, right? And what I'm going to do is, hey, destroy the other game object if it's not my player, right? So I'm going to do this. I'm going to say if, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say if, let's check this first. Other.gameObject.compare tag, right, is player, then do something, else, why it's important to do this properly, else, do something else. And the reason why I'm saying do something else is because I'm getting a bit of an error, right? What's the error? It's a warning. It says, parse error, unexpected symbol, else, right? Well, here's my if. Here's my else, because I forgot an extra bracket, right? And now the else works, right? And I want to take this destroy. So if it's something else other than my player, this is just the way I program it. You can do this differently, of course. Destroy it. It's something else other than my player, right? If it's my player, though, I don't want it to destroy it. I want to reset it on spawn point. So what I want to do is I want to move it back into the game, right? So reposition it to the spawn point. So I'm going to do something like this. So my other.game object, right? And I got the other game object. Now, how do I do this? I'll do it in 2 lines. So var, we'll do this. We'll do var, instead of var, sorry, transform. We'll say player transform. Player transform. Let's break it down into 2 objects. Is equal to other.gameObject.getComponent, right? Transform. Right? And then I'm going to say this. Player transform dot position is equal to this dot spawn point. Make sense? So all I'm doing is resetting the player back to the spawn point. Now my spawn point has to have a default value, and I haven't done that. I'm going to do that here in my start, right? So I'm going to say by default, my default value is in my start, unless I otherwise say so. My inspector will take hold of this, but it'll be spawn point is equal to a new vector3 object, which with the coordinates of 0, 0, 0. That's my new definite. That by default, that's what it is. But in the inspector, if I go back to death plane, then I should have. Just gonna close this all up here. I should have a, my script, right, which has my spawn point. Look, 0, 0, 0. So this is my spawn point right here, and here's my mesh collider, which is a trigger. I'm gonna move this up a little bit, so move it up so that way it's all partnered correctly. And here's this thing, this death plane script, right? This death plane script. Let's see if I can move this up too. I don't think I can. My death plane script has a spawn point of 0, 0, X, Y, and Z, right? So what is my spawn point? I know what it is. I have it saved in my game controller, right? So if I go to my game controller, and if I look at my script, my player spawn point is being generated by my game controller for the first time. I can read it as an example, right? But I want to make it so that in this particular thing, it's going to be this, these 0, 0, 1.6, and -5. So that's what I'm going to put in my death plane for this one, 1.6 and -5, right? Make it 1.6. Yeah. 1.6 and minus 5. That's what the spawn point's going to be saved. Let's see if this works. So press play. Da-da-da. Okay. Whoa. Oop. Oop. Up. Up. Hey. Oh. That's not right. How come I keep on respawning over and over again at the same place? How come? Well, here's my player position. Huh? My Z position is minus 5, right? So let's take a look at where the spawn point is, right? So let's see what this is. So here's my spawn point. I'm putting it in by details here, right? What's another way that might be a better way to do a spawn point for my player, right? Well, I could add in another thing in here that shows me the spawn point. So I could make a player spawn point, you know, for this particular point, player spawn point 1 as an example, and make it an empty object. So let's try that. So go create empty, and we'll call this, you know, player spawn point 1. So spawn point 1. The reason why I'm calling it spawn point 1 as opposed to, you know, spawn point is because this spawn point 1 will be the place where my player starts off, right? It's going to have an initial position. Let's focus on where it is. That's way down here. That's not where I want it. I want this to be equal to my player position. And my initial player position, if I look at my prefab, does it have one? It has 1.6 and minus 5. So copy this. Remember, this is my player position. So here's my spawn point. 1.6 and minus 5. And my scale is 100, whatever. And if I move it, so here's my spawn point. If I focus in on my spawn point, it shows me where it's going to be. It's right here. That's where my spawn point is. Right? I can move it higher or lower or whatever I want. But this is where my spawn point seems to be. Okay, cool. Now what I can do is I can drag my spawn point onto my death plane, but that means I have to change my code. So let's go back here. And here's my spawn point. And instead of being a private vector3 object for my, as my game controller, let's look at my, my death plane. And here's my public vector3 spawn point, vector3. Instead of initializing it here, right? I'm just going to drag and drop it instead of initializing it. Okay? So I'll make it a public vector3 spawn point object that I will drag and drop onto there. So go back here and look at my death plane. And what happened? How come it's 0, 0? It's not 0, 0, 0 anymore. How come I don't have a default location? How come it's still there? Can I do that? Can I just drag and drop it over here? Can I go like, come on, I want to drag and drop my spawn point onto here. How come I can't do that? Well, because what I really want to do is change my transform, right? My transform position is what I want to do. So instead of this being a vector3 object, this is a transform, right? My spawn point. And now that it's a transform, it's not a component anymore, right? And down in here where I have my spawn point, right? See where I have my transform? That's going to be equal to the transform of my spawn point. So I don't have to do position. I can just call this dot spawn point, which is the transform, one transform to the other. And then now that I have that, click away and click back. Notice that it's a transform, and I can drag and drop my spawn point on top of it. Let's see if that works any better. May not, right? Oh, let's see what's happening. Whoa. What happened again? How come the collider's not working anymore? How come? What's my console say? Nothing. So what happened? So here's my mesh object. Here's my spawn point. So I get a location, a transform, and it shows me where my guy is, or whatever, right? And here's my player object. My player has what it has, right? But how come my player is not transforming anymore? My player's not working anymore. How come? Well, let's read this information to make it work, right? So one thing you need to know is, first of all, what's this spawn point in the first place, right? So let's take a look at and read the spawn point. So I'm going to do one of these. I'll say this. I'll say debug.log. right? Debug.log. And I'll say something like this. I'll say inside my debug log, I'll say this dot spawn point, right? Dot position. What's my position of my spawn point, right? All right, let's try this again. So run it, play it, because I didn't change my collider, right? Okay, and woo! Okay, it's -0, -1, 1.6, and -5. My spawn point. I don't understand. How come my player isn't moving there? How come? Come on, guys. What do you think it is? Why do you think my player is not moving there anymore? Because I'm making it equal to the transform, right? And the funny thing is with transforms, I know this is kind of weird, but you're going to try this on your own. You're going to go, what the hell? How come it's not working? And that's what I'm doing with you. One of the biggest challenges we had last semester. Okay, so I do have a spawn point, but what I could do still is do this. Player transform dot position is equal to the spawn point dot position, right? Whatever the position is of the spawn point. I could do this, which moves it, the actual transform moves it. I can also use the rigid body. I gotta be careful with that. All right. Now I'm just gonna show you this though. So this is where my public transform comes into there. I take my public transform, I get the player's transform by looking at the other component, because the other component has to be the player, and then I move it, my spawn point, to wherever it's gonna be. Let's see if I can do that again. Back to Unity, try it again. Run it, jump off the point, and I'm back here. This time will work, watch. Oh, here's not working? How about over here? Back. Try it again. Back there. No matter where I go. Oh, didn't make it. Oh, jumped off. Wait. That's normal. No matter where I go, I get back to this. Now, one thing I don't do is I don't lose a life. So the next piece I need to do is when I transform, I need to lose a life, right? Because I fell off the edge. So how do I do that? So this is working, right? But I need to lose a life. And the only way I can lose a life is if I have a reference to my game object, because my game controller object is the thing that controls the scoreboard right now, right? So I need to make an object, a reference to that. Now this one I can do public game controller, because this game controller is not a spawned object. Game controller. There it is. So I say public game controller, and what I want to do is say something like this. I want to say, fine, I move by game controller. Hey, here's something. How come I don't have? Oh, here it is. Lives value, minus. I take my lives value. But the way you can also do is minus equal to 1 if you don't feel comfortable with that. So minus equal to 1. So I lose it. And I also want to make a sound, like some kind of hit sound. So when I hit something, it's like, oh, like some kind of hit sound. I don't have a hit sound like that. Well, let's make one really quickly. So how do I make one? I have this program CFXR. You can also use BFXR, which is online. I have one that's CFXR, which is me. There it is. So I got a hit, right? Some kind of blip, maybe. Oh, that's cool. How about explosion? Okay, that sounds better. Maybe up. And then I get it back, right? So I'm going to export this thing. Right here it is. I'm going to export this thing, and it's going to be called, player dead. Player dead, and I'm going to put this into my library, right? So desktop. I'm going to go back to Unity projects, and we're working on a project COMP305 game 3D game demo under my assets, under my there's got to be a place for audio. Hey, do I have a place for audio? Models, prefabs, textures, materials. Oh man, new folder. Audio assets, export wave. Done. Kill this. Don't save. Kill this. Go back to Unity, which is here. And it's importing the asset. Take a look. It's importing my scripts and my assets, and under my audio, I have this player dead thing now. There it is right there. If I want to play it to test it, let's play it. That's pretty good. So that's what I want to hear when I die. So I want to get this player dead audio, right? I want to attach it where? To the death plane. Because that's where the death plane should always play that audio clip, right? So click it here. New audio source. I don't want to play on awake, but I want to play the audio source, which is this player dead audio source. Now I got to make a reference to it. Damn, all this work. All right, so this could be a private reference. So private instance variable. You can also make it so that it's drag and drop, because you can drag and drop it from itself, right? I'm just saying. But let's make it a private audio source. We'll call this thing player dead. Player dead. There we go. And we'll make a reference to it here in our start. So we'll say this dot underscore player dead is equal to game object, this game object dot get component audio source. Audio source. That's what this player dead is, right? So the first audio source is going to give us the player dead audio source. And what I want to do here is once this happens, play it. So I want to say this dot underscore player dead dot play. It's going to play that audio source when I get hit. It's going to go right every single time I die. Let's try it. Cool. Walk off the play. Oh, what happened? How come I didn't? First of all, I didn't lose a life, and I didn't. Oh, I got reset, but something happened. What happened? So console log. Null reference error. Object reference not set to an instance of an object. Death plane controller on trigger enter. It says scripts death plane controller.cs. What's going on there? How come it's not working now? It worked before. Here's my thing. Well, it means that something's going on here, right? Let's do a couple things. First of all, we will block out some of the stuff to see if it works. So we did a bunch of stuff here. We said game controller.lives values equal. Oh, I know why. Undo. I know exactly why. I didn't do this. Yes, Tom. You're getting tired today. Notice that my game controller is here, but I didn't do one of these. Game controller, drag and drop. No drag and drop, no reference to my game controller. And we'll save the scene. So file, save scene. And let's stop. Try that again. Game controller, so it was in play mode. File, save the scene. There we go. And play. And now this should work for me. All right, so Yahoo! Oh, see, I got, and I also lost a life. Right, lives went to 4. Try that again. Oh, lives went to 3. Right, so now I got that death life. But I don't know why, but my lives are all messed up, right? Well, because in my old script, this goes back to the game controller script itself. When I type lives like this as opposed to capital. I don't know why I did that, but it kind of lives fully. All right, so let's play one more time. So back to this, play one more time just to test it out. And launch. Yahoo! Okay, back to normal. Lost a life, right? And if I attack the barrel, it'll kill the barrel too. Let's bring that barrel back. So there it is. There's my barrel. Let's bring that barrel back over here. Test the game so we can see everything scores working. Life. I fall. Boom. I made it back before it even blew up, right? And there we go. We can continue on. So those things, so mechanics are working for me to lose a life that way. Okay. Okay. Here's one. What if? Just saying. What if I I want an object, and I know we're running late, but what if I want an object to follow me around, right? Well, there's a couple ways we can do this, kind of stupidly simple, right? Just saying. And some of the ways may not work. But let's say we had like this rolling ball, right, that rolled around the scene. As soon as it kind of came near me, it just keeps rolling towards me all the time, right? So how do I do that? Without pathfinding, right? Well, one of those things is to know is if I look at the Unity Vector 3 object. So let's go Unity 3D. Vector 3. So I want to see what the Vector 3 object has built in. So let's take a look. Well, here's what it got. I got built in back, down, forward, left, one, right, all these static variables that are built into Unity, right? And look what it tells you. It tells you a direction. So if I say forward, it's 0, 0, 1 in the plane. That's the forward position. Okay? But it also has some methods. So I've got some static functions I can use. for example, I can do move towards, right? So vector3 object, move towards. Okay, cool. Let's get an example of that. Here's one. So transform position, vector3, move towards, you know, and it says transform dot position, target position, and then a step if I want to. Wow. That means I can move towards another object by sliding around, right? And by changing my transform position. Or I can use my rigid body, whatever. Let's see how that works. And by the way, this float step is time.delta time, because what you want to do, you want to move it along a regular pace. All right, so this is the regular way. This is pretty cool. I want to use this for an enemy. Let's make an enemy really quickly. So, and this is just one example. We can also use pathfinding for an enemy. We'll make an enemy kind of appear right here, right? So let's try this out. So we'll make a new, I'll make a new 3D object. It'll be a sphere. And make it so that it is over here in the scene. So it'll appear over here. We'll make a new material for the sphere. So just to make it so it looks like an enemy. So make a new, create, you know, new material. And we'll make the material red. So it looks like an enemy sphere, right? And there's a material. So here's mine. And we'll just rename this thing enemy. It's like we did player. And then here's the sphere, and we'll take my enemy material and attach it to the sphere itself, makes it red. And we'll call this sphere enemy. There we are. And what we'll do is we'll say this. Every frame on update, I want to get a new script for this enemy. So we'll add a new script. So go to scripts, and we'll go to create C# script. And we'll call this player follow. Player follow. There we are. My player follow script. Let's double click here. Right? So here's my player follow script. And just like I did, I'm going to go back online. And I like this idea. Here's my speed, right? As an example, my public float speed. So it's going to move at me at a certain speed, right? And it's also going to be my target transform. I like all of this stuff. Let's just copy it. So I'm just going to copy this stuff here, public transform and public float speed. So let's move that over here like this. So into my public class. There it is. Now there's some work we have to do. So public instance variables, right? And bear with me while we do this. This is a simple example, right? And what I want to do, not in the start, but in here, I want to take this stuff here. Put it in my update. So what is this going to say? It's going to say, take my transform position. Now, you know what this transform position is? That's this object's transform position. So I really want to say something like this. And this is just me, because I do this a little bit different than they do online. So I say private instance variables. Got some work to do, right? Like I said. And I'm going to do a private transform, and then we'll call it transform, right? And in here we'll say this dot, take care, transform is equal to game object, this game object, oops, game object, no problem, dot get component. And then we'll say transform. There it is. So that's our transform. So now we can go this dot underscore transform dot position, just so we know what I'm talking about here. And we'll move forwards from, this is the origin, to target position, and what's the step that I make. Now there's going to be some stuff blocking it, right? Which is cool. Let's see if this works. So this dot underscore transform position to my target position. I need target position and speed, right? So let's say that. Cool. And we'll go back to Unity. We've got my player follow script, and I've got my enemy. I'm going to take my player follow script, and I'm going to attach it to my enemy. There it is. And I need a target, which is my player, right? Now, whoa, where's my player, right? Well, there's a couple ways to do this. I could drag and drop, right? I can drag and drop, but my player, my target won't be the same all the time, right? So we have to think about this. So I'm saying there's some work to do. I go to my player, prefab, and let's say if I pull it in here. So can I do that? Yes. My speed, let's say, is 5. Save. Play. Ah! It's pretty fast, right? Let's try that again. Speed 1. All right, I like your speed. Let's try it out. Let's move around. Oh, look it. It's hovering there. How come it's there? How come it's there and made it there finally, but it didn't? It's just hovering there in midair. How come it's doing that? Let's move back a little bit and see where it comes here. So and it's moving at 1, and it goes right to the wall. Why is it doing that? Right? It's moving right to the wall because, just like I told Francis in the back there, I don't have a rigid body, number one, for this thing. I do have a sphere collider though. I have a sphere collider, but there's no rigid body, so it's not falling or anything like that. Let's add a rigid body just to make this more interesting. So we're going to add this in, then we'll let you guys go. Okay, so add component, physics, rigid body, right? So there it is, the regular rigid body. So let's see if it falls now. It's not kinematic, and let's see if that works. So, okay, no rigid body. Is it going to come through the wall? Did before, went right through the wall to come at me. Well, how come it's not coming at me now? There it is, right? It's trying to get there. Like it's still trying to get there, right? But it can't get there, right? But it's going to my original position. It's not going to my current position, right? So I needed a way of getting my current position's data, right? So that's, like I said, we have to do a little bit of work. I like the idea behind it, but it's not complete. Let's go back to here. Back to the drawing board. Okay, so what I really want this to do is this. The target position, every update, it's got to change. Target position's got to be the player position. And I'm going to get this every update. And that means I got to use find with tag player, right? That's what I want to find, right? Find with tag player, and I want to get the transform of the player and to attach it in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a private transform. That's what it's going to be, right? And it's going to be player transform, player, oops, underscore, player, or yeah, that's what it is, player transform, right? And here's what we're going to do. We're going to say in the start, we're going to say, just to make the reference for the first time, we're going to say this dot underscore player transform is equal to game object with a capital G, game object, dot find with tag player, right? Dot get component, right? Transform. Okay, that's what it's going to be. Player transform. Now that I've got this as a player transform object, transform, I should be able to do something like this. This target position is, target position, if you notice, is a transform, right? So I could do something like this. I could say, this dot target dot position is equal to, right? Just saying, right? This dot underscore player transform dot position. Every time, every frame, my player position is going to be updated, and that means my public transform target doesn't have to be public transform; it can be private. So I don't have to get it from there. I can put it over here, right? Make this private. So private target. We'll rename. We'll just rename this thing. So we'll say rename. Refactor rename. So target. There we go. Target position. Target position is equal to the player position. So target position is the player position every round, right? Poof. Okay, a little bit of scripting. Let's see if that works. And press play. Null reference error. Okay, how come? I'm getting an null reference error because it says null reference error. Object is not set to an instance of an object. Player follow update, which is this. This dot target position. This dot target position, right? Well, yeah, of course it is, because we've set it as a transform, but we've never really instantiated it as a transform, right? We've kind of made it as a transform, but we haven't done it. It says this target position is a transform, right? We never really did anything with it. Let's just do it like this. We'll say inside of our script, we'll say this dot underscore target is equal to a new transform, just to say, right? And if we do that, if I go one of those, I mean, that's just I'm instantiating. It's still going to have a problem. Why? Because this player transform position, right, is what I'm getting this target position. Right, so this is what I'm saying. So this target position. Okay. See if this works again. See, we're still going to have the same problem. So let's just stop doing this and do it. Still get a compiler error. Let's see what happens. It says, what's the compiler error? It says, null object reference not set to an instance of an object, player, follow update, and the follow. Right, so let's clear this thing up. It's this target transform. I can't do this, is what it's saying. Can't make a new transform like this. So that's not the issue. That's not the way to do it. And how come? Well, I got an instance. I got a game object, find with tag player, get component transform, and I'm assigning this to the player transform, which is this, right? How come I'm not getting anything in here? I'm saying this target position, and I'm trying to get this every frame, but I'm not getting it. Well, how come? Well, again, because my game controller, I need to get this, I need to update my player position every single time, right? I'm getting a reference to the player, right? So, okay, let's see what it looks like. So debug, I'll let you guys go after this. Debug, I swear, debug.log, this dot underscore player transform dot position. So see what it is. See what I'm getting with my debug.log, right? Play. Okay, null reference error. Let's escape and check my console. Do I even get that ever? Right? Well, no, I don't. Okay, cool. So we're getting a null reference error. Let's kind of come back here for a second, and we'll go back to my script, and let's just undo these things, these steps. And all I want to do is get my debug.log this.player transform position every frame. Let's see if that's the problem. Okay, so press play. And yeah, I can't seem to get a reference to my player position because I'm getting a null reference error. And I'm getting that, if I press stop for a second, if I'm getting that here, if I double click on the thing here, this reference right here in my update, player transform position, right? Here's my player transform. I'm getting a reference to my player transform, but find with tag player is not working. How come? Anybody have is there a class after this? No, good, thank God. All right, so what would be the reason why this isn't working? My player transform, I'm getting it dynamically. I'm getting it through script. Is there something else that I can use instead of find with tag? Find game object with tag, right? I could do that. So let's try that out. So instead of find with tag, just putting it out there for you guys, right? Find game object with tag. There it is, player, get component, transform. Let's see if that works. And if I get my, first I want to do this. If I can't get my position, I can't do anything, right? So let's try this out. So let's play. Still getting null reference errors for my object. How come? Casting, I could. But that means that I'd have to do one of these. I'd have to say as transform, right? So I could do that because basically what I'm saying is I want to get it as a transform, right? So I could cast. That was the problem we had last time, but that casting doesn't give us it doesn't get rid of the error. All it does is give us code hinting, right? Because we get this still, null reference error, object not set to a reference of an object. So I want to get a reference to my player transform. What else? Right, well, here's something. What about if I want to get the game object itself, right? Is that going to help? So forget my transform for a second. Let's make another variable, private. We'll say it's type of game object, right? And we'll call it player. Game object, right? We'll call it player underscore player. And let's just sub this out for a second, just for a second, and do one of these. So I want to do this so we see our work, right? So again, we want to say this dot underscore player, right, is equal to game object with a capital G, game object, find game object with tag, right, player. Okay. Let's make it simple. And what I want to do here in my debug.log as soon as we do this, right? I want to do one of these. I want to say debug.log to check it. Debug.log this._player. And I want to say, because it's a game object, I want to call it the tag. So the tag of the player that I get. So I should get player back if everything goes well, right? Let's check this out and see if it works. So run, I don't get any more errors, right? And whoa, I'm still getting a reference error. It says reference error is this debug.log player tag. This player tag, I can't seem to cut a break here. I can't get a reference to a player. How come? Well, because it's a prefab. But we've done it before. We've got a player. We've got an access to a player before. We did it with game controller. You know, but we can't seem to cut a break with our player, right? So how do we do that? So reference to a prefab would be the way to look at it. So get reference to prefab Unity. How do we do that? That code, and it's going to give us some solutions, right? And this is not the solution we want, right? Anyone have any ideas before I start searching the forums? Because why this should be working for me? I'm probably missing something stupid. How to find a prefab via script at runtime, right? And here's the solution in green. Variable for prefab equals resource. Oh, that's terrible. Is that how you do it? That's horrible. C# variable for prefab game object resources.load prefabs prefab1. That's terrible. That's a horrible way of doing it. That's horrendous. That's just I want to get it at runtime every frame. I don't want to just get it one time. I want to get it all the time, right? That's terrible, right? What else? How other ways can I do it a little easier?
This script doesn't have the
How about sending a message from the player? I want to send a message from the player. I want to send a message to the player to the enemy. Yeah. So the way to do that would be, if I have my enemy, right? I would say every single time I'm going to have my player script itself, right? My player script itself, to be thinking about this, will have a getter, right? A getter for my player script, right? So I cannot access my transform necessarily, but my player script itself that exists. As soon as I access my player script, just like we did last time, right? With my game object, my game controller, right? I want to access it so that I have a getter that I can set. I can get the position from my getter. I could do that. What other ways? This is a crappy way. I don't like this way. How can I reference a prefab for a game object instance of it? Hopefully they won't have another one. Disable your objects instead of destroying them, reinitialize them and enable them rather than instantiate new ones. That's not what I want. Input, get key down, instantiate prefab. No, I don't want that. What else? Instantiate. No, I want to get a reference to the prefab to variable via C#. All right, and please don't say the same thing. So drag and dropping actually importing prefab from assets to build, and thus prefab can be accessed inside build itself. In other words, all prefabs in assets folder do not go build automatically, and thus they are not part of the game object collection, and thus cannot be found by game object define method. That's the reason why. And the reason why is because they don't get built until they get instantiated, because my prefab isn't being instantiated until after the game object is running. What do I need to do? I need to change the order of my script. I need to make sure that my game object gets built first, then instantiates my order, and once my game object is in play, then I can get a reference to it. So, sorry, that just tripped me up. So if I go to Edit, and if I go to Project Settings, I remember we did this before, Script Execution Order, right? I can choose I can vary my script execution order a little differently. So I can add in the first script. So if I go to my scripts, I don't have to put them all in, but I got some funky things going on here, guys. Be careful. If I start playing with script execution order around, right? Just saying, right? My issue with this is that it really depends on what goes first. So what I really want is my game controller script to go first. My game controller isn't the one, it's under scripts. So here's so first, it's got to be game controller, right? And then what I want to do is it's got to be the player shooting script, right? But I got to be very careful here, like I said. So here's my player shooting script. And then after my player shooting script, the death plane, right? And then the enemy player follow. So death plane, let's say, and then player follow. And I click apply, and there's a problem already. I can tell you right now. Right? If I press play, that's good. I was hoping there wasn't going to be a problem. Thank God, no problem. That's good. So that solved my issue. Why? Because the order of execution, there's no execution set normally, and I have to change the order of execution to make sure my player gets instantiated before I access it with my enemy. Whew, crazy. I did this before. I just couldn't remember why the problem was. Okay, so now that we've got this, let's go back to what we did before. We don't want to do this. We want to do this and all this back to the way we were. We don't need this anymore because we don't need a game object. And we're just going to get rid of all that stuff that we did before, which should cause us to have a real-time position every frame of our player for the first time. And let's see if we can do that. Null reference error. Let's see what we got. A red null reference error. So same thing, which is right here. Target dot position is this dot player transform dot position. Back to the drawing board. That player position back in. All right, so if that's true, if we got a player in here, now we're going to do the player dot game object. This is the player object. So if I go into my script and say debug.log, sorry, I'm really running over. I apologize. If you guys want to go, you can. I'm just going to keep recording. I'll say debug.log this dot underscore player dot. Now remember, the transform is what I really want to look at. Transform dot position. What I really want to see there, right? Because I found my game object, right? And let's see if that would work. If I can debug.log and produce that. Or if I get a null reference error. Hey, that's cool. Let me move around and see what happens. This is good. See how the player position is changing? This is good. We're almost there, guys and girls. All right, so that means that if I go back to here, this works. This doesn't. So get rid of this ugly thing. But now that we've got my player.position, I can do something like this. This dot player dot position is equal to this, and undo this. Now we should be good. Let's get rid of this. Lots of work for some debugging. This is debugging, man. This is what we do. We debug, we check online. Of course, it makes sense, and then we get this done. Okay, good. Let's go back in here, and we'll press play, and null reference error. Okay. We're almost there. Target.position, right, is equal to player.transform.position. What was that? Target.position is right here. Private target position, right? So transform, right? And what if we just did, instead of target position, we just put the player position in there. So let's get rid of this. And we have our player position. I know this for sure. So target position will just be player.position like we did before. So maybe undo that. Sorry, undo that change. And take this here, put this here. So we know that that works. So I'm able to get that information in there. So target.position is gone. We don't need target anymore because we got a player. And now let's see if that works. Yes. Okay, so now, no errors. Let's see if this thing, where's that little ball, right? See if it moves around with me. Yeah, okay, it's coming at me now. It's gonna try and crawl over me. Oh. In fact, it's look, it's just, what's going on? How come it's just moving so fast? Wherever I go, it's kind of trying to chase me. Whew. I'm free of it, right? Right? Free of it? Man. Free of it now. Oh, wait. So now the ball follows us around. This is the enemy, right? Now that I got the enemy running around, when the enemy hits the player, then I lose health, right? It's pretty simple. And I can make that this enemy itself isn't here, but rather it's up here somewhere, right? Like, you know, maybe on the wall somewhere. So it's starting off down here, right? So now if I do that, I'm not going to do the script now, but you can see how this goes, right? So I'm here, I run over here, and then now it has a little bit of, run away, run away. If you have more than one of it, right? What if I blow it up? Right? I can fire at it, I can blow the enemy up. I can't do it right now, but I could. And it's going to walk really slowly towards me, right? No matter how I go, no matter where I am, right? It's going to keep going towards me, right? If I go on the wall, well, right? It's going to try, it's going to wait for me. Look, waiting for me, man. It's waiting, right? No matter where I am, if I go over here, it's going to come at me. Look, it's just rolling towards me, right? So here I am. Look, no matter where I am, it knows where my position is, whether it sees me or not, it's going to keep rolling towards me, and I can kind of try and kill it, right, like that. So very simple way. This is where I want to kind of come today. I wanted to kind of show you that there's a very simple way, although it didn't turn out to be that simple, right, of showing you how to do the simple vector move to method that's built into every vector to move an object like a sphere, which is one of the simplest ways to do it, towards you. Imagine if it's not a sphere, but rather lots of little spheres, right? Lots of little spheres are moving towards you, but when they hit you, they blow up. They self-destruct. So they only hit you one time, and when they hit you, they do damage to your player. So like, let's say a little sphere, a little ball that comes at you like a trap, and then they run at you, right? If you can blow them up, you can give them a chance to blow them up, to remove them with little explosions, right, or little popping sounds, whatever you want to make it, and you've got a game. You've got a bit of a, hey, these balls are running after me kind of thing, these enemy balls or whatever, right? You could also make it so it's an actual object, like some kind of weird, really weird face or something that comes at you, like a, I don't know, like a floating skeleton. It just goes like this, right? Anything you want, right? As long, I mean, I'm just using a sphere because it'll roll and it'll roll after you, no matter where you are, right? But anything will work. Questions around this? Covered a lot today. We covered how to do the death plane properly, how to reset your character and create a spawn point, right, which is kind of important to do, and how to create a simple, stupid enemy that follows you around no matter where you are on the screen. Hey, here's something else. You can also make it so that if the player's position or the distance between the player and the enemy is, you know, less than 10, then it'll follow you around, right? How do I do that? Well, going back to just one more thing before I go. If I go back to Unity scripting, and if I look at my vector3 object, right? So here's my vector3 object again. Notice that I also can find the distance. Here's my distance between A and B. This is really cool. It's built in. So if I click distance, it'll say the distance between one object and another object. So I can say if the distance between my two objects is less than 10 units, then follow me. Otherwise, stay where you are, right? So it kind of makes it so it's not so annoying, right? So it'll only follow me around when I'm next to it, as an example, as opposed to all over the screen. Okay, guys, that's it for me today. Good luck with your assignment 3. It's due Friday. And then next week, we'll start in on some extra little things we can build in for your final project.